co-moderating the session today. I'll be co-moderating the session today with Ishan Bharadwaj, who will introduce himself in just a moment. But we're here as part of Columbia University's Climate and Justice Education Week, and also as an official side event of the UN ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is unfolding right now in New York City and online. So welcome everyone who's come to us from different avenues today. Our session will focus on the role of youth and youth engagement as we educate for sustainable development. And our speakers today are all part of a special issue academic journal where we ask leading scholars and practitioners around the world to reflect on the field of ESD and its policy implications. One of the many themes to come out of that journal issue was the role of youth. But before we get deeper into that, I want to give the floor to my co-moderator, Ishan, to introduce himself and also our discussants today. Ishan?
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Ishan Bharadwaj, and I'm a junior at Melbourne High School. I'm a science research student, and my most recent project has actually been on tackling polystyrene pollution, using biodegradation at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in Columbia University. But I think more importantly, I'm an eco ambassador, and I have been one since 2018. And I've been involved with climate action initiatives in the community and beyond ever since. I'm an officer of the environmental club in my school, and I'm actually the co-founder of the podcast Sustainable Steps, along with Shrey and Ishan. And with that, I'll pass it over to them.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much. My name is Shrey. I'm also a junior at Ivy Park High School, and this is my second year as an eco ambassador. And I've always been interested in the environment, and I've been participating in environmental initiatives ever since I was little. And as Isan mentioned, I was a co-founder of our podcast, Sustainable Steps, and I'd like to pass it over to the other discussant, Ishan.
Hello, nice to meet everybody. My name is Ishan, similar to the other Ishan. I also go to Melbourne High School and I'm also a junior. I'm currently working on a report talking about the impact of ESGs on financial markets, and I'm also the co-founder of the Sustainable Steps podcast.
Great. Thank you so much, Ishan, and Shrey. It's wonderful to have you all with us today. I definitely recommend checking out that podcast to everyone who's online today. I've listened to it. It's wonderful. Before we get into the session, I just want to take a moment to sort of set the scene today. And I want to give some statistics to think about. So according to the UN, the global population of youth is around 1 billion, and the global population of children is another 1 billion. So currently, around 40% of the world's population is under the age of 24. So clearly, we have a massive and growing population of youth. Other statistics that I want to bring to your attention are the timelines to achieve our global goals. So of course, we're aiming to achieve the SDGs by 2030, but in reality, we know that this will take much longer, especially our climate goals. According to the UN, we need to reach net zero by 2050, which is 25 years from now. The World Economic Forum estimates that for women to reach gender parity in political, economic, and educational arenas, at the current rate of progress, it will take until the year 2158, which is another 133 years from now. And some experts have argued that without expediting progress, the SDGs won't be realized until 2092, which is 67 years from now. So we have this huge population of global youth, and we have several development objectives that won't be achieved in this generation. What this tells us is that the role of educating and empowering youth has never been more important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ishan to introduce our speakers today. They'll be presenting the papers that they wrote for our upcoming journal issue, which will hopefully be out in May. Their papers address policies for ESD, and we'll hopefully get into a little bit of how youth can better fit into the equation of ESD and education planning. Ishan?
Yes, thank you so much. So our first presenter is Dr. Livleen Kalon. Dr. Livleen Kalon is the Associate Director for Environment Education and Awareness at the Terry Energy and Resources Institute in New Delhi. Dr. Kalon is actively involved in the strategic execution of various models of education for sustainable development. Her core work critically reviews and analyzes documents and reports related to environmental education and youth empowerment and outreach. But prior to joining Terry, Dr. Kalun worked with the Worldwide Fund for Nature and National Institute of Science, Communication, and Information Resources. Thank you for coming, Dr. Levine. Kalun.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you for the introduction. Um, what I'm going to speak with all of you now is specifically about the project that is being done by Terry. And this is a project which is now 25-year-old. So the importance of bringing this project now to a global audience is to tell them and also to share with them that what are the features of an environment education project that sustains the momentum and how rigid or flexible a project needs to be to evolve over the course of time. Way back in 90s when the project was conceptualized, SDGs were not there, national education policy was not there. We were not even speaking about education for sustainable development. But over the years, as the project picked up momentum, it had a whole school approach. It adopted a lot of non-formal education tools because at that time, even environment education was not mandatory in a country like India. So this open-ended approach and this flexibility of the project has enabled it to sustain over the years. And while we were moving on, now we see that it's a very, very dynamic and well accepted program, not only in the country of India, but also in several other countries, actually 14 countries across the globe. So a little bit more about the features of the program, it talks about non-formal importance given to education, environment education, and then how networks and partnerships are crucial, critical, and non-negotiable when we speak about impacts of any environment activity. The project runs across the country in all the states and union territories. And the point of this expansion is because this program is accepted, it is endorsed by the leading environment and education ministries of the country. So when we keep talking about non-formal interventions, we speak about the nudges, we speak about behavioral change, we speak about community impacts. But what we found important here is that even if we are trying to do projects or activities in a non-traditional format, it is very important to hook to the audience. Here, the audience is the children and the youth through agencies which have a reach, a partnership across the country. So these are some of the key USPs of the program and how this particular Green Olympiad as a focal point of academic learnings and influential behavioral changes have made a lot of impact. Another concept that has happened over the years when Green Olympiad was happening and we were able to do justice through the program was the STEAM versus the STEM concept. Green Olympiad rests on interdisciplinary learnings. We do not have a very defined syllabus for the project. We do not define the age group. It runs across several age groups, several levels, and we do not even define the disciplines. Because what we are aspiring to do through this program, this concept, this initiative is to nudge a behavioral change. And this behavioral change has to happen through students, through the colleges, through the youth. Hence, it has to have a main point from where it starts. So it starts through a Olympiad. And Olympiad is a written examination which the students take. The questions in the Olympiad are not at all based on rote learning. They are more conceptual in approach, they are more evidence based. And while the students respond to these questions, they automatically enhance the environmental learnings. And that is when, information about sustainable development goals, information about mission life, information about global citizenship are all capsuled within the program. So, since it is a non academic, a non formal approach, it is very, very easy to do so. And while we are doing it, we also take a conscious decision that the students are not necessarily from one country. So, when we speak of environment, the entire issues, the global issues need to be considered within the purview of environment. So while we speak about tropical storms, we are also conscious about the heat strokes that are happening, the changes in the weather patterns, the climate changes, glaciers melting. So all environmental issues are capsuled in this Olympiad, and it is brought to the students of all countries, nations, and age. The approach will vary, and hence even the marking would vary in some way, because for some students who are aware of these happenings, these global changes happening, they will attempt the questions with a knowledge uh, perception. They are aware of it. The students who are not aware about these global happenings, they will have to put a perception thought that they have to put themselves into that particular situation, into that particular heat stress situation, and then judge or assess what their response will be. So this triggers a lot of thinking amongst the students, and that is why we say that this is not a very, very fixed or a frigid approach to an examination, but it is very, very flexible. All topics that schools, students, youth need to be aware about, including climate change, biodiversity, the natural resources, policies, green skills, sustainable lifestyles, are all inbuilt in the question paper. And while this information is inbuilt into the paper, there are a lot of leads that are given on environment improvement activities that the students can opt for. Hence, a focus on action projects and community outreach. So, a step by step enhancement of knowledge happens. And if you just recall a few minutes back, I said it happens across several age levels from grade 3 to K-12. So, the questions also vary. While at a younger age group, we are making them more about the world around them, the senior age groups are more conscious about the green skills, the job opportunities, the climate change, the climate justice, intergenerational bonds. So these type of concepts. So a very, very thorough mapping is done on age appropriateness of the questions, and then these are brought to the students. The examination is open, the Olympiad is open to all age groups, and also there is a senior higher education level, which is for colleges and universities, for which students up to the age group of 30 can register for. At that senior age group, it is more on a community impact. What is it that they have learned or that they are practicing based on the knowledge that they have got from the schools that will be useful to the community? What are the areas of prioritization? What are the partnerships and networks that are important? What are SDGs all about? So, all these are handled and conceptualized into questions of the Olympiad at the senior age group. So this is more or less about the entire program that I would like to speak about. And here I would also like to mention that at Terry, we are very, very conscious of the focus areas around which the environment education projects are woven. We have projects for students and youth which mostly rest on the mandates of the national ministries and institutions, including NCERT, University Grant Commission, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Ministry of Education. Hence, programs like Satat, programs like Mission Life, they see a presence in this Olympiad. Moving on, we also put a lot of focus on strategic communication. And when we are focusing on strategic communication, we do a very, very balanced approach between formal, non-formal, and informal tools that are engaged, students are engaged with through the projects that they are undertaking, and how these tools enable the students to reach out to a wider audiences. Behavioral changes are the overarching goal of all our programs, because behavioral change, as we all know, is a long drawn process. But for Green Olympiad itself, it is in place for 25 years, and 25 years over 2 decades is a long frame of mind for a student to first become aware, then adopt, practice, and introduce a change in the society. And the overall impact that we want to see in the community is to reduce health risks, improve the public health amenities, do a lot of improvements in the air and water quality, which would all happen only when a student, a child, a youth is able to understand and quantify the indicators which are linked to these measurements of environment and social happenings around them. So this is how we program the projects, and we are also looking forward to expanding the reach of the program to other countries and regions. UNESCO has come forward, and very soon we will be doing a regional chapter of this particular initiative. So I would just pause here, and I would welcome questions at the end of the talk. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Livleen. So we're going to have a Q&A period at the very end, and people will be able to enter their questions in the chat or raise their hands. I do want to ask a follow-up question, though, to you. I mean, first of all, you started some really great questions on what's necessary for behavior change, which is good to think about. But also, it's interesting to think about how ESD largely started in the non-formal education sphere, simply because we didn't have it as part of national curricula. My question for you is, how does youth empowerment differ from formal to non-formal settings, and do we approach it differently?
Yeah. See, you absolutely answered by the first sentence that you said earlier. We were only doing the non-formal approaches. So it was a sort of an initiation that was happening amongst the youth, the students, the youth who were keen to come forward and volunteer for environment improvement activities. They were a part of this particular initiative. But when we speak about the formal approaches, now even the colleges and universities have mandated credit programs wherein environment education is a mandatory acceptance for the students to clear and apply for before they are able to graduate. So this shift, this policy ruling has made a lot of impact. And then, when we deal with non-formal settings, it's more the non-formal tools like theater, folk dance, music, writings, workshops, which are there in play. But when it comes to formal, like as I said, credit courses, a mandatory credit course for a student to clear before they are able to get the final degree is something which is being offered. And right now in India, it is very much operational. University Grants Commission, which is the leading agency when it comes to higher education, now has a compulsory UG course on environment education, and it is interdisciplinary. So once it is interdisciplinary, the canvas for a student to experiment becomes great. So they still, while they are compulsorily what would I say, attempting that particular credit program, the approach will vary. They can do it as a community project, they can do it as a learning, they can do it as a music, a song. So this type of flexibility is there. And of course, I would say non-formal settings are more important when it comes to youth, because whatever changes, development changes have to happen, knowledge based changes have to happen, will happen till the age group of 14. Post that, it is more of what you voluntarily want to opt for. And this voluntarism will happen when the changes, the education, the awareness is being offered through a non-formal setting.
Great. Thank you so much, Livleen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalon. I really liked how you talked about using this like more flexible, informal approach combined with, interdisciplinary learning in these Olympiads for the youth to really address, all citizens of the globe and different age groups as well. So thank you so much. Our next presenter is going to be Dr. Pramod Sharma. Dr. Pramod Sharma is a senior director of education at the Foundation for Environmental Education based in Copenhagen, Denmark. He has over 25 years of experience working with environmental education and education for sustainable development, and was previously the program director at the Center for Environmental Education in India. Dr. Sharma oversees overall program development, administration, and evaluation of several of FEE's global programs, including Eco Schools. Welcome, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you for this kind introduction. Let me share my screen. I hope you see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I think one of the I would say defining moment that happened when we were talking about sustainable development goals, especially in context of target 4.7, is the emergence of greening education partnership in 2022. And since then, it has evolved into a major push or a vehicle where a lot of partners, over 1,500 partners, have come together to pull resources and drive direction. And it also overcomes the challenge we had with SDG 4.7, because all were process indicators or input indicators, and it basically defined it the SDG 4.7 with an output indicator in 4 areas, and also try to address the need that was there when we are talking about strengthening education for sustainable development as a key tool to achieve sustainable development goal, and also address and recognize the effort and the impact we want both in global north and south, with similar targets for all the countries, and also mobilization of resources, and also address the issue that is there through an whole school approach, when usually the global efforts are disconnected from a place-based education perspective. So the 4 pillars that it identified with the targets are in terms of greening school, which is a whole school approach and has elements of other pillars also, but essentially asking accreditation of 50% schools in every country around the world, achieving a standard as part of the Green School Quality Standard that was released last June by UNESCO. And greening curriculum in terms of asking all the countries, but at least 90%, having climate change education as an integral part of the curriculum, and then having a target on greening teacher training and education systems capacity. I think this is an important aspect where it also recognizes that it is not just the teacher, but also the principal of the school who has to be trained. And that's important because it recognizes the important role the administrator of a school plays when we need whole school approach, and many aspects like space and time for climate education, curricular linkages across different subjects as an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary subject. And the last pillar of in terms of lifelong learning on greening communities as such, looking at ways by which this can be continued and the large population can be educated on the action that is required to mitigate both the impacts of climate change, but also the causes that are there because of which the climate change is happening. And through EcoSchool, we have been doing this effort as part of the greening pillar one, and then also through Young Reporters for Environment program. And then I will be talking about based on our reflection of these two programs in terms of what are the key challenges that we see and opportunities that we see when we are looking at the greening education partnership. One thing which has become very clear is that as per the data, this has changed because now we have around 98 countries who have committed to the Greening Education Partnership. But we can see that not all parts of the world are responding in the equal way. There are two reasons for it. One is financial, lack of resources that is there in some parts of the world that we can clearly see in Latin America and Caribbean islands, and also Eastern Europe within the European part, and then to some extent in Africa, but then a lot of resources are being mobilized for African countries. But then these two regions, Eastern Europe and Latin America, are lagging behind on this. But then other aspect is that countries which have resources like Western Europe and other group, and then there are political things also, that we only are seeing 50% commitment on greening education partnership, which is, in my opinion, a key challenge because if they are not involved and they're not educating young people, it is also they are also failing on the mitigation action that is required when we're talking about climate mitigation as such. So it's not about the world which has to adapt, but it's also the world which has to reduce their emissions as such. And there are many strengths that we see in this process, that it has clear identified goals, and each pillar basically sums up the action that are required within the education sphere as such. And it has a whole school holistic framework that involves everybody, including parents and communities. And then clear standards have been communicated through Green School Quality Standard, and a flexibility has been ensured within that countries can choose or schools can choose different action based on their realities, and 1/3 of actions are being mandated to achieve the accreditation as part of existing programs. And then it basically also acknowledged that it is a partnership, not at different levels. And at school level, it is in terms of whole school approach, students, teacher, parents, and broader community has to come together. And a school has to become a change agent where it influences the community. And then by involving, and I think for the first time, the existing partners from the civil society and the schemes and the programs, it is asking for continuity and scaling up instead of, in sometimes it happens in this field that we look for innovation, new ideas, and all those things. If they're established programs and ideas like EcoSchool, how can we scale it up? How we can work with those together as such? And then I think the leadership of UNESCO, which is the leading organization on ESG, is also important. It's helping. And then it apart from when we talk about environmental education or education for sustainable development, I think it can have a long-term influence on education policy as such. Education for sustainable development is action oriented, and we are asking action on basically action oriented when you're talking about climate change or other environmental issues. And that action orientation means that a different pedagogy of active learning, and which is and project based learning, where students needs to be involved as change agents. It's a transformative education process where we are asking young people to practice those change process in the school and take it to the community, and not be just a passive learner as such. And then by providing a collaborative opportunities between stakeholders, it's pooling resources and meeting the challenge in terms of the capacity building needs that are there. And then it also, I think, is important because it also creates a space where role of education is seen as a solution for the community. I think that's an important aspect when we are talking about why we need education, because in my opinion, and what I strongly believe in, that if any education system in the world is not talking about climate change or any other existential crisis, this education system is outdated. It's not uh, catering to the need of the society. But then with all those opportunities and the strength, it has inherent weaknesses as such. The target of 50% are overwhelming. Any country you pick up, except 7 countries in our own program, we are not in globally, we are not even reaching 2% of all the schools with all the program that we have. And then we are talking about multiplying it by 25 times with no resource allocation or additional resource allocation at the global or national level. And then when we are talking about a short duration, what we have learned over the years of implementing the eco school program, that it's a cultural shift. It's a different way of teaching and learning. And you cannot just use the green school quality standard as a checklist. But if we are result oriented and we are asking about achieving that target as per the green school quality standard, we might fall into the trap of basically using that as a list and ticking off those checklists without implementing a quality process there. Then the third is, and we have seen that now, that it's a political instrument, education always. And then when we are talking about sustainability, people think in political terms as such, and that political mindset might not allow a program like this to succeed. And then when we are talking about training, capacity building needs, transformative process, that means a certain quality of education. It's like to absorb good quality nutrition that is being observed, you need to be healthy also. So it's not with that you are unhealthy and then we can basically take benefit from a program like Greening Education Partnership. So the quality of education itself, I think in many countries. So it's a basically, there is a potential to improve the quality, but then that is also a determinant. That means it might take more time in terms of seeing the results that we would like to see around the world. And then there is a varying commitment as such. And then when we put a ranking system around the world, it also leads to, small shortcuts where countries who might be lower in the list, like when we look at the Sustainable Development Index and all those things, they might find ways to manipulate that, and that might defeat the purpose that we have. And then and it's not a one-time thing. It has to be sustained over the years, and that means that it's not one-time achievement that a school is certified. It's a continuous process. And what we are also seeing, that a lot of focus has been on Global South, and we are struggling in terms of getting Global North to participate in Greening Education Partnership. And they have a major role, apart from supporting the Global South, but in terms of reducing their own consumption and emissions as such. So key actions are required. One is that we have so many initiatives, so many demands: restoration education, ocean education, climate education. I think we need to find a synergy and prioritize our work and the education that we want to reduce the pressure. So minimum knowledge, as was highlighted by Livlin, is important, but then also action agency. So it's about the skills that we require to take action, and then the knowledge that is required. And then with need to also acknowledge that students can identify and ways to get those information. And then there are knowledge gaps and blind spots. We are seeing that when we work on a large program, and we need to basically investigate more. That means invest in more research so that we can provide targeted support for different regions. A similar curriculum cannot work around the world. We need to be targeted in terms of where are those knowledge gaps and what needs to be delivered in a particular region. And then environmental literacy is also poorly understood. That has been my experience. The knowledge part is well understood. Most of the education systems deliver knowledge. But here we are talking about changing attitude or disposition and behavior change education. And those elements are not well understood, and the tools to measure those impacts are also not there. So this is also an important aspect we need to look at. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the active learning pedagogy requires capacity building, and it takes time and patience, and we need to be there. And also address the gender gap that is there usually in most of the program, where we see more female participation than the male participation, which might be true here also, as if we look at the audience and the participants in this webinar. And also, I think the important aspect of strengthening the monitoring and evaluation system as such. So there is an opportunity here, and we need to work together, but then we need to be aware of the pitfalls that might be there. And as a community of like-minded people, we need to keep an eye on that. This is also not seen as one more scheme where it is used as a checklist and defeat, and we are not able to achieve the intended objective, where education is seen as a key tool to achieve sustainable development goals, particularly when we are looking at climate action. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Pramod. I think many of us on here today are part of the Greening Education Partnership and the ESD for 2030 work. If people are not and they're looking for information on that, I dropped a link in the chat. Pramod, I've had the wonderful opportunity to follow the work of Eco Schools these last few years, and it's a great program. And so I want to bring it back around to that youth angle, and I want to ask you a follow-up question, which is, what has been most effective in the Eco Schools model for addressing youth empowerment? Or alternatively, what changes and impacts have you seen due to the active and empowered youth in your programs?
So I think what has worked is that our insistent, I would say, stubbornness when we talk about green flag accreditation of a school, that 50% of the eco committee members should be the students, and the chair of the eco committee, which leads the action, should be a student. So I think that has helped in putting young people at the center of the change process, and helping them acquire those skills of leadership and the change. And in this process, they transform the sustainability performance of the school, but also transform themselves with all the skills that are required when we are looking at SDGs as a challenge. And then also engagement with the community. And what we have seen because of that is a complete turnaround of an education system in a school, which then understand it better, that the real purpose of education is not transforming knowledge alone, but it's about helping young people to navigate their environment and take action as such.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. I really like your focus on teaching about climate change through, its impact on one's own community, through like active learning pedagogy, rather than in some sort of like abstract, maybe hyper STEM focused way, because it is a real problem that we're experiencing. And I think, teaching it in this way, as you mentioned, would be much more productive. So thank you so much for your perspective. And now I would like to introduce Duri Lee and Dr. Laura Engel. So Duri Lee is a second-year doctoral student in comparative and international education at George Washington University. He holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's in comparative and international education. Before beginning his doctoral studies, Duri worked as an education researcher at KEDI, assessing national policies for at-risk students in the Republic of Korea. He has also worked as a data analyst, evaluating the effectiveness of global citizenship curriculum in higher education in collaboration with the United Nations Academic Impact in Korea. And Dr. Laura Engel is a professor of international education and international affairs, and chairholder of the UNESCO chair in international education for development at the George Washington University. And as a policy sociologist, Her interests focus on multilateralism and the influence of global education policy trends in national and regional systems, with a specialization in federal systems. And Dr. Engel's research, which has been funded by the American Educational Research Association, the National Geographic Society, and the Stevens Institute, has been published in 4 books and over 70 articles, book chapters, and policy briefs. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Let me just quickly share my screen. Can you all see the screen? No?
No,
No.
we can't.
No,
No,
Yeah.
we can't.
No? Yes? Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Duri Lee, and the title of the project is The Global Governance of Education for Sustainable Development. And we look at cities as critical policy spaces. The project has been funded by GW's Elliott School of International Affairs. And from this project, we published 1 paper in special issues in Journal of Education for Sustainable Development. Which is coordinated by colleagues at the SDG Academy. And we will be having a webinar near Earth Day. You're welcome to all join this, and the QR code at the bottom has more information for you. What I will be presenting today is an overview of the project and some early findings of the second phase of this research, with the data collection and analysis still underway. This is still in progress and early, so we welcome feedback as we develop these ideas. So over the decades, global agendas have shaped how quality education is defined, from the early efforts like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which recognized education as the fundamental human right, to more recent global agendas like EFA, MDG, and currently Sustainable Development Goals. These global agendas have continued to redefine what is quality education, expanding beyond access to education to support sustainable development in many areas of life. By saying many areas of life, I mean to say that it requires cross-sectoral attention within a country, which creates the need to invite the expertise of stakeholders at multiple levels beyond national boundaries. This transformed the traditional governance model of nationally driven education policymaking. So now ESD governance operates through multi-stakeholder networks where global, national, and local actors collaborate together, not just the national government. And this shift has created new power dynamics beyond the national boundaries, with an international organizations, local authorities, and civil society playing, playing key roles in shaping how policies should be translated, adapted, and implemented in the city's local context. So therefore, we look at cities as critical policy spaces for policy adaptation and innovation, where stakeholders from different levels come together, interacting and making the policies globally aligned, but still locally relevant. So why cities? According to United Nations in 2023, 55% of the world's population lives in the city today, which is projected to be 70% by 2050. And SDG 11 calls for making cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, highlighting the importance of local actions. Also, we look at Paris Agreement which highlighted cities' role in mitigating climate crisis, and the new urban agenda, which emphasized local government's ability to advance sustainable development. This brings us to our research question: how do cities with different political systems adapt and implement ESD policies? And to answer this, we draw on policy mobility as the theoretical framework and conceptualize ESD as mobile and mobilizing policies. And this will help us to examine how ESD policies transform and evolve as these policies move across diverse cultural and urban and political contexts. We selected Seoul, Republic of Korea, Washington, D.C., United States, and San Jose, Costa Rica, because each of these cities represent distinct governance structure. Seoul represents a centralized system, Washington, D.C. a decentralized model, while San Jose a unitary but decentralized model. This will allow us to compare how different political systems influence ESD policy implementations. This study takes a multi-method qualitative approach. We do a document analysis, interviews, and qualitative analysis to identify some patterns across the cities. Seoul represents the centralized approach to ESD that is driven by strong interaction between the national government and the city government through key legal frameworks, which made the long-term planning and monitoring possible. This slide shows you the timeline of how global agendas have affected policies at the national level, which then affected policies at the city level in Seoul. What you should take away from this slide is that it's the dynamic between the global, national, and the city level policy development. Washington, D.C. Represents a decentralized approach for ESD policy implementation. D.C. is a federal city that has the autonomy to implement state-level policies like the Environmental Literacy Plan, which embeds sustainability in K-12 education, and also the Healthy School Act to address the city specific needs. Also, DC fosters multi-stakeholder collaboration through the DC Environmental Education Consortium, which brings schools, agencies, nonprofit organizations, and local communities together. In San Jose, Costa Rica, Education for Sustainable Development has become part of the national brand. While San Jose operates within a centralized system, its ESD policies have been shaped through collaboration with the international organizations. Regionally, San Jose contributed to the 2006 Building ESD in Latin America meeting. And globally, Costa Rica stands out as one of the greenest countries in the world. And it often directly refers to UN SDG at both city and national level. I try to compare the emerging findings from the document analysis and interviews in the table. So first, Seoul follows a centralized model, ensuring the structured policy implementation aligned with the national and the global frameworks. However, ESD is cross-curricular and competes with 38 other learning themes with no coordinating departments, which leads to inconsistent policy implementation. And also, education policies are perceived highly political, so changes in the superintendent leadership can affect how ESD policies are framed and prioritized and implemented. Secondly, Washington, D.C. operates under a decentralized system, leveraging local autonomy and collaboration. While this fosters innovation, it also leads to fragmented policy implementation and weak alignment with the global agenda of SDG. Lastly, San Jose is centralized, but its ESD policies are heavily influenced by international organizations. Yet the political shift at the national level affects what happens at the city level, and also the rural access issues, and inconsistent teacher training creates obstacle in San Jose's context. Okay. So in conclusion, we see cities as critical spaces. In other words, cities are not passive receivers of global policies, but they actively adapt and transform these policies in collaboration with multiple stakeholders, responding to local context and priorities. Also, the governance matters. The way policies are implemented, whether through top-down or more decentralized or participatory models, can lead to very different outcomes. Finally, we highlight the local-global interaction. Global SDG-related frameworks don't just flow down uniformly. They are interpreted, they're translated, they are negotiated and reshaped by local actors depending on the political environment. And these are the future directions that we have in mind, compare more city context, and look at how examine community perspectives beyond the policymakers to include those that are affected actually by ESD policies. And we also plan to look at policy interactions, how cultural and socioeconomic and historical factors beyond the political system can affect the policy adaptation and interpretation at the local level. That is my 8 minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Dewey. That was a really rich presentation of case studies, and I really enjoyed reading your paper. My follow-up question is for you and Laura. It's how can this approach drive youth empower? I'm sorry. Sorry, that is my question for you. How can this approach drive youth empowerment and engagement, and what are the ways that youth can be incorporated into policy development at this level?
Great questions. I'll jump in and just want to thank Dewey Lee and actually Sumi Arpachi, who's I believe on the webinar as well, for their collaboration on this research project that we're undertaking together. So I'll speak from the perspective of our comparative research, which suggests that cities adopting local level policy initiatives. So for example, in Washington, D.C., the watershed education work or Seoul's Green Futures schools can advance the design of education for sustainable development programs that we can see have direct impacts on youth's lived experiences and their engagement with their local environments. Some of these, as Dewey mentioned, are motivated by global policies related to Sustainable Development Goal 4.7, brought into those specific contexts, and others are generated in connection to local partners. So there's, I think, a real opportunity in both for youth empowerment engagement, but perhaps differentially organized or modeled. While our research is not engaging in the implementation of these policies, we would see that by focusing on city-level policies, that these approaches increase local relevance and encourage students' participation through hands-on experiences and leadership opportunities, and that both foster empowerment beyond the classroom. To your question on the latter part of your question on how youth can be incorporated into policy development, certainly there's a lot of literature on how youth can be incorporated, and I just want to mention a couple of perspectives from our research. First, on how cities can institutionalize youth participation. We see some evidence of how student representatives can be very powerful in ESD planning committees, designating youth delegates to climate and education fora. Youth can contribute to co-creating sustainable development curriculum. So for example, school gardening or climate literacy projects. And in monitoring ESD implementations, such as in the example of Seoul's 5-year plans through youth-led audits and participatory evaluations. And lastly, and I think this is really pertinent to the session you've brought together today, is that how youth can contribute and take part in UN bodies working to advance ESD. So not just at the city level, but internationally. And hopefully by sharing these examples of city-level policies, we're able to think more critically about what's happening in the city environments all around us. So thanks for these great questions.
Thank you so much, Duri and Dr. Laura Engel. Our final presenters are Dr. Matthew Winstein, Dr. Sumi Song, and Dr. Wendy Purcell. Dr. Matthew Winstein is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Administration at the University of Dayton. He also serves as an action researcher, action research and rights faculty fellow at the UD Human Rights Center as a senior research fellow in the School of Educational Studies at Claremont Graduate University. His U.S. work focuses on immigrants in higher education and international educational experiences, while his international comparative education research focuses on higher education quality, organization, and governance issues. He is the editor of several academic journals and book series. Dr. Sumi Song is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Green Program, an award-winning experiential education program focused on the world's most pressing sustainability issues. And as a director, she works with colleges and universities to integrate sustainability into the academic curriculum and promote the development of a diverse sustainability workforce. She is a Fulbright alumna, a member at large of the NAFSA Member Engagement Committee, and previously served on the Peer Corps of the Higher Learning Commission. And Dr. Wendy Purcell is the vice chair for education and professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health and Justice at the Rutgers School of Public Health. Dr. Purcell has been an expert advisor to several national government departments and initiatives. She has researched and published extensively, and she maintains several advisory and leadership roles, including as a council member of the United Nations University, governing board member of the European University EELISA, and member of the American Association of Universities and Colleges. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much, Ishan. I'm going to get us started. So in light of the fact that progress on the SDGs has stalled, as we've discussed this morning, and that there are grave concerns that they will not be achieved in a timely manner, our paper proposes a reframing or reconceptualization of ESD, of Education for Sustainable Development, that includes an explicit focus on innovation. We draw on youth workshops, conferences, and policy dialogues held over the past 3 years, which are summarized in a working paper and guide for policymakers on fostering youth-led innovations to accelerate progress on the SDGs. That paper discusses barriers to youth-led innovation, and it identifies strategies for opening up the innovation ecosystem to youth in ways that foster their inclusion and belonging and empower them to contribute to sustainable development. Here in this paper, we delve more deeply into the question of how to go about creating enabling environments for youth innovation. How do we engage youth as leaders? How do we include them in decision-making and provide them with the support and opportunities necessary to scale and accelerate innovative solutions? We present a working definition of innovation that makes clear that simple techno-scientific innovation is insufficient to tackle the ravages of unsustainable development globally. Socio-cultural solutions also are of paramount importance. Youth represent the current and future workforce as professionals, scholars, activists, entrepreneurs, leaders, as citizens, parents, as caregivers. So at this critical inflection point, youth-led innovation is absolutely key to advancing a healthy future for people and planet. So in our article, we outline a theory of change that demonstrates how education for sustainable development can address this gap between stated policy objectives and real-world impact by scaling youth-led innovation for social change. Examples of action-oriented, global citizenship-focused projects are presented throughout, which illustrate the range and the scope of ESD-focused innovation and model, more importantly, what we refer to as radical collaboration, that is genuine partnership between young innovators and established organizations involved in innovation. Such partnerships are not well developed. The theory of change points to the vital role, moreover, that educators play in shaping learning experiences that promote innovation and position youth to contribute to sustainable development, and in strengthening cross-sector engagement with stakeholders such as businesses, entrepreneurs, non-governmental organizations, and government agencies. Our theory of change indicates also that policy in this domain needs to embrace the integration of innovation with ESD curricula at all levels. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Oh, thank you, Sumi. So as a research team, we spend time reflecting on the totality of the working paper findings and insights, and then we realized through our team reflections that it was necessary to propose this theory of change that Sumi's talking about as a mechanism for better positioning youth innovation and youth leaders. and that intersection between that, intergenerational knowledge exchange. So there's a gap in the literature and practice for this idea of enabling environments for youth innovation as it relates to sustainable development work. Hence, we proposed this, what we're calling the theory of change for empowering youth-led innovation to accelerate sustainable development. The proposed framework is based on ESD-driven innovation for social change and highlights the importance of context, of scalability, which is really important, right? And adopting a developmental approach to change. So that developmental dimension and the collaborative dimension are really critical to our proposed framework. So if you'll see in the chat, I just put the link to what's both our framework, which you'll see in figure 1, and secondly, table 3, which further expounds upon each of the dimensions of the framework with numerous example items and an explanation for each of the items. So the framework outlines that comprehensive theory of change. And because we have a limited time, I'm simply going to give you just a taste of the framework and invite you to further engage with it in our upcoming article in the special issue. So in terms of that resources dimension that you might see there on the first dimension, I focus on the idea of the institutional agent, who is an individual that as a the idea of the institutional agent as a mechanism for connecting youth with needed resources that can lead to youth innovation. So as table 3 indicates, if you look down below, institutional agents are educators, mentors, and leaders in education who genuinely open spaces for youth contributions, empowering them as leaders through shared knowledge and tools. So this way you're kind of getting to see how the actual figure, the model, sort of engages with that table and gives more examples. So the institutional agents' tools and resources often their understanding of human development of youth-aged people are critical for germinating and amplifying youth innovation. So institutional agents tend to be people who are willing to tap into their knowledge and tools to amplify and support people's development and success. And my guess is, as youth leaders, it's important to figure out who are those institutional agents. How do we engage with them, find them, tap into them so that you can work together? So this idea that Sumi mentioned of radical collaboration, that second piece of the theory of change, is a key. There's a key connection there between the institutional agents I just mentioned and this particular domain. So radical collaboration practices. When we're thinking about this framework emphasizes the importance of youth and educators as true partners, community engagement with ethics and action, effective mentorship, and this idea of intergenerational knowledge that's really important, and the creation of enabling environments for youth innovation. So one question I have is, how do youth innovators and leaders and mentors or guides or institutional agents develop what this space looks like together? That is a critical, component here. What does that space look like? So considering the typical experiences in which youth are seen more as those who are taught versus serving as co-leaders and co-learners, radical collaboration is this opportunity to transform this paradigm. So proposing that intergenerational knowledge exchange can work between youth and adults is really critical versus thinking of it as a top-down approach. So a final note before we get to our colleague and friend, Wendy. So one question I have is, how might you propose using this idea of radical collaboration in a transformative manner to germinate hubs or incubators or whatever you may call them to nurture and scale youth innovation in a sustainable development context? So we invite you to explore the 5 dimensions of our theory of change for empowering youth-led innovation to accelerate sustainable development. Wendy?
Thanks so much. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sumi. So I think it's a great note to end on, just to recognise, I think, youth as the critical actors here. And what we're saying is, how can we ensure that innovation enables youth to bring their ideas to life? as part of the sustainable development solutions that we're looking for. And I think we noted that many of the innovation assets or innovation ecosystems are often closed to youth. And so one of the things that we call for is policy that opens up those assets to youth and their ideas. And that we actually reframe education for sustainable development that situates innovation as a key part of the ESD mission. So I think that kind of rounds off our contribution, but I think it's a great way to reposition youth as critical actors in that innovation ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Widenstein, Dr. Song, and Dr. Purcell. And thank you so much to all of the presenters for your really unique perspectives and experiences. So now I'd like to open it up to the audience. If you'd like to ask any questions, to just use your raise hand icon and we can call on you. Or if you have any questions, you can just unmute.
I was saying maybe while we're waiting for that, one of the points we also, I recognise we're short on time, was to just draw out the really important role of mentors for youth innovators. I think in our paper we recognise that many of the career paths that young people are encouraged to follow don't necessarily reflect, I think, the full role of entrepreneurship and innovators. And so opening up the innovation ecosystem to ensure that there are mentors available to young people to develop their ideas and take them through was one of the things that we really highlighted. So Matt mentioned that intergenerational space and a reciprocity between younger people and people who are maybe established entrepreneurs or those in the business sector. So there is a recognition that there isn't just that young person receiving mentorship, but they're also giving very much access to their ideas and their mental models when we look at sustainable development. So I think that was one of the things we wanted to draw out in the Q&A, but I'll offer it now. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Yes, that was one of the questions that we wanted to address today because, the concept of mentorship, I think, is so often left out of youth involvement. A lot of times we're just giving youth the space to be visible, but not actually to interact. And then when you drill down into what does mentorship really mean, I think that there's a lot of superficial views on it. So you really have to think about that intergenerational partnership, that collaborative effort, and that dialogue that has to happen. So thank you so much for addressing that. Ishan, were there any other questions today? I know we're a little bit over time and I appreciate everybody staying on. We've had a lot of really rich presentations today and I know we still have a couple of discussants to give remarks here.
Yes, I think Emily in the chat has a question. What is the first step that I have to take to begin my innovation centered around ESD? If anyone wants to jump in and answer that. Yeah.
Happy to start. So Emily, I think it's a great question. So one of the things that we highlight in the paper is the number of things like competitions and hackathons and, creating a space where we're looking for new solutions and your idea having real value in those spaces. So that's a great way to start, is to look and think, how can we think about doing this thing in a more sustainable way and how can I bring my ideas into that space? So looking for competitions, hackathons, even internships where you're going in with a fresh pair of eyes into a new space and bringing your ideas into those spaces. So that's a great way to start.
Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I will turn it over to Ishan and Shrey if they have any other questions or if they want to close it off for today.
Ishan, may I just put in a sentence here?
Yeah.
This may look like a very, very philosophical thought, but my advice or my request to the younger generation would be, please pause. It is very important to do things, but sometimes it is equally important to not do things. So everybody cannot do everything. Please pause, look around you, first find out what is already available and link yourself in effective partnerships. So that is something which will be very, very sustainable. The more you discuss, the more you share, the chances of success of those ideas are more. So this is just a suggestion from my side that I'd like to say.
I think that's a
If
really
if
good.
I could also,
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to piggyback on that. I think what we learned from a lot of community-based youth work is that exactly what you said about plugging in, listening, sharing, learning how to work alongside others. Maybe you are not going to pursue a traditional sort of the traditional educational kind of arc or path. You may find affinity with groups in your community that that organize around shared and common interests, and that's another place where you find intergenerational learning and support. Sometimes it may not be someone who's 10 or 15 years older. It may be someone who's 5 years older, but finding that community and drawing support from like-minded individuals and people who may share your lived experience is also really critical.
So Ishan and Shrey, can turn it over to you now for closing.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'll try and keep this short because I know we're over time, but thank you so much to all the panelists. This session has been incredibly insightful. So, as a young person listening in, I was struck by the diversity of perspectives, but also how like connected they are. So, firstly, what stood out to me was the power of like the whole school approach, as we saw with the Green Olympiad. So, when sustainability becomes part of school's culture, not just an add-on to the curriculum, it can shift the way students think, act, and lead beyond the classroom. It makes environmental consciousness something that's lived and not just learned. And the emphasis on holistic education reminded me that the most impactful learning isn't always about memorizing facts, it's about developing critical thinking and the belief that you can make a difference. It's about recognizing that education isn't just for personal growth, but for shaping communities and ecosystems too. I also appreciated how the Greening Education Partnership was framed, not just as a policy initiative, but as a global call to align our education systems with the urgency of the climate crisis. So, that kind of alignment between what's taught and what's needed in the real world is something youth have been calling for again and again. And it's really nice and encouraging to see it starting to take shape. It also made me think about how change doesn't happen through policy. It happens through everyday choices of teachers, students, and schools that choose to prioritize sustainability, even when it's not easy. So when we equip young people with tools, space, and trust, they don't just learn about the environment, they start leading efforts to protect it. And for this to truly work, we need to shift mindsets. So youth are often told that we're the future, but the truth is we're already part of the solution. We're already showing up, and what we need is for our contributions to be valued not as something that is symbolic, but as something that's essential. So as we look ahead, the key is not just to create more spaces for youth, but to make sure those spaces have real power to create, to challenge, and to lead. And with that, I'll pass it to my fellow discussant to continue the reflection.
Thank you so much for the insightful discussion by the panelists. So I'd like to build on the idea that systems must shift because one of the most compelling takeaways for me is that change must not only come from the top down. Change also must emerge from communities, from cities, and from networks of people across the world. So during our discussion, we observed how cities across the world are localizing sustainability. They're actively spearheading education for sustainable development initiatives rather than passively waiting for national directives. This tells us something crucial. We can make a significant difference no matter where or who we are. There are already youth-led initiatives in place such as community-driven innovation, social enterprises, and climate action projects. However, for these initiatives, we need more robust infrastructure around us if we were to prosper. This entails going beyond motivation to actual collaboration. It means consistent mentoring, trust-based funding, and decision-making forums where youth perspectives are prioritized rather than treated as an afterthought. It goes beyond standardized testing and classroom instruction. It's about communities we learn with, the voices we elevate, and the values we uphold. It encompasses intergenerational wisdom, indigenous knowledge, and the life experiences that mold our worldview. Therefore, let's make a commitment to creating educational systems that are able to influence us for the future rather than just preparing us for it. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Ishan and Shrey, for your closing comments here, and Ishan for co-moderating with me today. We are well over time here, but we've had an incredible amount of people stay online, which I think shows the power of this session and the topic that we're talking about. We won't keep you any further, but thank you all for joining. There will be a recording that will be emailed out. Also, definitely check out the links that were put into the chat. A lot of great resources there. And we hope that you guys can come to our session next, I think next Wednesday on the 23rd for the launch of the journal issue. So with that, thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.